that's all the time we had for today. I'm sorry.
That's good. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we'd have to sit closer to each other if you wanted to really get good pictures, and we don't want to be that close to each other.
So what have you guys been up to during this year?
All kinds of fun stuff.
Tell me.
Certainly, I spent the better half of the first 6 months of COVID trying to keep the coffee shop up and running.
Yeah.
And obviously, like any business, but especially the restaurant businesses that had all sorts of challenges and things that go bump in the night. But, you know, as only happens in a universe that's upside down, you know, now there's so many people at home and working at home, and geez, I got to get out of the house. Our daytime business, our coffee business is bigger than it has ever been in keeping the place afloat. But we're not open in the evenings yet. We haven't done, you know, we're just now starting to look at coming back with live music and staying open at least weekend nights. We'll start that going into the 1st of May. But the base business is doing, you know, the coffee and the lunches and that type of thing has become enough to keep the business going without any of the other hassles. So who knew?
That's great.
Yeah, the capacity restraints were crazy.
Yeah.
You know, you just can't put, but, you know, you don't want to go, clearly you don't want to be in a building with a lot of people when this thing was going on.
Exactly. And still, I think, you know, some modicum of caution is certainly necessary, you know.
Absolutely. But, and again, you know, you got to love the way bureaucracy works. So obviously when COVID first hit, you couldn't go into a restaurant. So we don't have a drive-through window unless you drive your car into the shop. So we carry it out to your car. And, but we're in the process of remodeling and thinking, okay, what can we do? And part of that is putting in a walk-up window, you know, and it turns out the city of Woodstock in the building we're in doesn't want to allow walk-up windows because, you know, somewhere it says, well, we'll do that on Main Street, but we won't do it 1 block off.
Yeah.
And it's been going on so long. There's so many new habits that are ingrained.
Exactly. And I really wonder, it's going to be interesting to see how many offices will have much decreased attendance, which then means the lunch crowd for restaurants will decrease, which means, you know, so on and so forth. On the other hand, people are just chomping at the bit to get back to what is known as normal, but I don't quite know how to define normal anymore. But
that totally went out the window.
Well, and we live in a, you know, a musical society by the nature of, you know, what we do. So normal for us really was abnormal anyway for most people.
Exactly. We started way off on the end.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know. I'm thinking of you know, starting up again this summer, late spring, early summer, outdoors anyway.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
how are your string players gonna handle that? Because I've played with other groups, and they try the orchestras are the ones that can't start back up yet, even though they have outside venues, just because I guess it's the string players that don't want the wild swings in climate. It's hot, it's cold, it's humid, it's not. I've played with other groups. I played with a small jazz band that we started back last, probably middle of July.
Oh.
We were able to get back together.
Well, we did a lovely concert in Inman Park last October with, you know, the trio and the quartets and a couple of solos and duets. And we're going to do another one now for the Inman Park Festival, which isn't really a festival this year. It's home garden tour, but it'll be really nice. Saturday we'll do that. And I have 2 indoor locations that might be big enough. It may really, you know, destroy the acoustics. It may not, you know, but I think it may be worth a chance. One is the church where we played our concerts, you know, in December. They have both the sanctuary and this huge hall in the back. Just, I mean, it's mammoth, you know. It's probably empty and the size of the entire sanctuary.
Wow.
So, you know, I think we might be able to, we're going to send out a questionnaire in the next couple of weeks to everybody.
Yeah.
If you
to see what they feel like doing.
Yeah.
Have you played any when you're, then again, I don't know how string players can do that, because it's hard enough with those of us that are producing a lot of sound. Right. Just from one side of the stage to the other, you get almost a delay.
Yeah.
And if you've got to put string players just aren't going to produce that kind of volume.
I know.
That's going to be, that's, mean, I see people that do it, and I've seen groups that do it with fairly small groups. I mean, you can't put 85 people on any normal stage.
No.
And
Be
6 feet apart. It just doesn't work.
Stadium, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, a thought that crossed my mind was that we might be able to do some Baroque music, you know, and have
chamber type.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe, you know, 4/4/4/4, and then
Mm-hmm.
and alternate who's playing, and then, you know, some an oboe, French horn, flute, whatever.
I think those groups are much more viable right now than large scale traditional 1800s chamber orchestras.
Yeah, no, I don't see that happening for a while, but yeah, it'll be fun. And of course, we
are you using any technology to I mean, obviously everyone has learned how to use Zoom.
Right.
Some of us better than others.
Yes, but I mean, and the musicians, and when this first started the first week, and I was taking a trumpet lesson, and it was a joke. I mean, just because of the connection and the mics and whatever, well, Zoom put out a few patches for musicians, and the musicians got very good with the kinds of mics, the settings they needed, the kinds of rooms they were in. And I am seeing some really nice stuff happening via the internet, where you can get people together and they're playing, and you're playing as a group, but you're sitting in your house doing it.
Sure. And I've got this like 40-page technical manual, because there is a service where they will take all the input and very quickly, obviously in milliseconds, you know, make it so that there's no lag. And then and I haven't tried it yet, but I'm really eager to try it. And
I know someone who developed an app to do that. Well, he's the artistic, the conductor down at the Carrollton Symphony.
Oh, okay.
He's got and he was working on that before this pandemic started, and it's a collaboration thing, but it also integrates, you know, the ability to pay, you know, because obviously they needed to monetize things. But there are ways you can do it that you don't have the lag.
Right.
So you can put multiple people together, and he's been experimenting with that somewhat with some of the groups.
And you know, those of us, you know, who've been privileged or cursed to have worked in a studio session, you know, it really isn't that much different, you know, where you know, each one's in a different sound room and you're playing together, you're hearing yourself, you're hearing everybody else, and magically it works.
Yeah.
Of course, those of us used to playing live, where you're not really in tune with the person next to you, and your entrances and exits aren't necessarily on a click track. You know, it may make us sound too good.
It's very odd for those of us, and I didn't do a whole lot of studio work, and I'm not used to being mic'd. And to do that is with a click track is a very unique feel. But even when I perform with people, even when we're doing it live together, they're using mics, and it's amazing that the artistic director becomes the sound guy.
Right.
Because you play at a certain level that works for where the mic is and what you're doing, and you're completely dependent on your sound guy to bring you to mix it, to get it right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a weird way of playing for me.
It's a fine art from the sound technician's point of view, and it is difficult for musicians who haven't done a lot of studio work. You know, it just takes time to get used to it. But it's amazing in some ways, you know, that it can even happen. I mean, this sort of thing 10 years ago was basically not doable. You know, just multi-track and, you know, piece it together as best you could. But you know, now, like even in Final Cut Pro, you can, you know, have all the different cameras recording, put them all, dump them in there, and say align them up by the audio track. That's how the AMO videos. And I used to be, you know, and now done, finished. It's like,
and it's there.
Great.
You're younger than I am, because I used to do that when we took a piece of tape and a razor blade.
Yes. Me too. Me
too. So we'll get those tracks lined up the hard way.
I had, I won't dwell on it too long, but I had an audio engineer who was the engineer for the Metropolitan Opera broadcast, the live broadcast. And Al was our engineer too. And, you know, we were small peanuts, but he was a good friend. And we had recorded this whole thing. The client went back to Louisiana. And I get a call the next morning. It is not hydroelectric magnetics, it's hydroelectric magnetics. Now the client had gone. Al was ready to leave. This is on tape, reel-to-reel tape. He spent all night digging in the garbage for a couple of good long E's and spliced the long E. It was hydroelectric magnetics. Couldn't hear a thing. It was absolutely perfect, you know?
Yeah. They there's something like that they do. I don't know if you know the guys that do a lot of the recording down with the down at Symphony Hall. But Joel Morris and Theodore talk about how there's a hum in the air conditioner system there, and when the AC kicks on, you hear it in the recordings, and they have something that they can play on top of it that eliminates it, and it's you know, like, oh my God, and they have to always, you know, sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't. It's just part of that hall, which is why they can't stand to record in there.
Exactly. Well, let me ask you both a little background. Sara, what is your background? Where did you grow up and study, and what did you...
Oh, I have a very eclectic background. I come from the middle of nowhere in the panhandle of Florida. So the first time I ever, and you know, my grandfather was a jazz musician. So, I mean, I listened to what, you know, as a kid, I heard John Philip Sousa record. I heard Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Elvis. I mean, that was my experience with music. The first time I ever heard an honest to God symphony orchestra live in person, I was sitting second horn, playing along with my my teacher was first horn, and he needed somebody to play second in I think it was Beethoven's third we were doing. And I knew how to transpose because I'd been playing other people's parts for a couple of years because I was bored with French horn parts in a band. So I'm like, oh, what is the baritone part? How can I play that? So I knew how to transpose and didn't realize it. So yeah, I have no formal background in music until I went to college.
And did you major in music in college?
Yeah, I got a performance degree in college up in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Nice. And
in horn, I thought I was going to be a studio musician because that's what, I was 2 hours from the city, and there was awful lot of work for people who could read, and I could read, and so, you know, that was a real valuable skill.
Right.
And of course, soon as I got out of school, digital recording came out, and you could sample things, and you didn't need as many live musicians as before.
Right.
Yeah.
Although quality is very different, but yes.
It is, but when you look at especially in New York, when you look at what the cost of a union player in 802, local 802, you know, it's suddenly you're willing to put up with a lesser experience, but just the cost savings there.
And unfortunately, the audience really can't tell the difference. You know, I mean, you can, I can, but the typical paying person who bought a $200 ticket or $50 ticket is there, whether it's the concert or whether it's a Broadway show. Yeah, the music is there, and the difference between a first class, you know, full pit and, well, there's a piano player and a click track. You know, I know the difference. You know the difference, but the paying customer, not so much.
Yeah. Although, I don't know, it'd be nice to have an educated audience, though. But anyway.
Well, there is that, but there's so many challenges to having that. And part of music ought to be it's entertaining. Yeah. You know, and people come, as much as I would love to play, Boulez, or, you know, something that you can go to New York and the Phil plays that kind of stuff on a regular basis because there's enough people there who get it, but you can't do that down here. I mean, play Wozzeck down here or something that I would love, but, you know, how do you keep an audience? And that's the whole meaning to play I mean, it's a performance art.
Exactly.
So,
and yeah, you have to mix and match and sort of slowly educate or bring in new pieces or whatever. But it is.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge for the artistic directors. How do you program something? And you know, if you're going to do a new piece, you better put a Beethoven symphony on there.
Yeah.
You know,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Or give me a Rossini overture or something fun, you know.
Yeah. Well, when did you move to Atlanta?
Oh, I moved to Atlanta right after college. I'd always wanted to live in Atlanta because to me, growing up in the South where there's no music, and this is all obviously pre-internet, Atlanta was the city. You know, I could come here and there were bookstores that had books, and there were record stores that had records, and there were people in this town. And my godparents lived in Inman Park and in Virginia Highlands back in this is in the late 70s, early 80s. And, you know, so you met people who actually understood the arts.
Right.
And it's like, if I can't live in this, and not that I wanted to live in New York, but, you know, if I can't make a living up there, I'll go to, now I'm in the South, but I'm also, you know, with a cultured area. Exactly. And that's a lot of fun. But I gave up, but then, you know, reality, you know, sets in, and hey, I've got to get a job. And when you have a job, it's really hard sometimes to keep up every Tuesday night or every Friday night, or I've got a concert. You can't do it. So I stopped playing for a good 25 years. Wow. And it wasn't until I was wrapping up my, you know, my professional career that I went back to playing.
Oh, okay.
You know, so, and sadly, I mean, there's no way to make up that difference. As much as I would like to be a class of a performer, that I know you know, I know what that should sound like. You don't make up that kind of time.
Right. No, it's a big span. But yeah, because I moved to Atlanta in the late 70s also. And,
okay.
You know, from New York, and it was the most, I think, satisfying city in the South. I wanted to like the South also. I went to college in the South, and
were you down in town as well?
Yeah, I'm in Inman Park now, and I've always been in this area. So, well, what about this other guy who's sitting there next to you?
Yeah,
that's very informal training. I grew up in central Minnesota, you know, God's country, the land of mosquitoes and snow, but about 60, 80 miles outside of Minneapolis. So, you know, we had access to the big city. You know, I started playing, I suspect like most of us, in 6th grade, you know, in the, you know, yes, you can be in the band program. And of course, I wanted to, you know, play guitar. And, you know, the guy said, well, you can't do that in the band. So I said, well, drummer's the next closest thing to getting in a band. And for whatever reason, was fortunate to have a very good series of instructors, you know, who took a personal interest in me and encouraged me. So when I got into junior high school, you know, did some competitions and qualified for what you now call an all-state type band in the junior high level, and became the section leader on that through the auditions, which then got me the right to sit in with the big people, you know, the high school band and or the high school orchestra, just for the rehearsals. And they had a guy named Vaclav Nelibel, who was a madman composer, happened to be their guest conductor that year. So I got to sit back and watch as he yelled, and he's very big in percussion, and he kept yelling at the percussionist, louder, louder, more bass, more bass. And I realized that there was a whole universe of music type stuff, you know, that you know, just growing up in the band program hadn't quite exposed me to. So that piqued my interest, and, you know, kept playing through high school. By the time I was 15, I got good enough on a kits, you know, that I started playing with my music instructor, who, you know, was ex-Marine and had a jazz ensemble, and just got into playing nightclubs and gigs and that type of thing. But because I had also learned how to read music and, you know, done piano for a while, I was unique in that I could also get calls to play the Shrine Circus, or, you know, to play percussive parts other than, you know, trap sets. So that exposed me to a very wide universe. When I went to college, it was a college that hosted a small public radio station called Minnesota Public Radio. So we started to do when Garrison Keillor came to town, and this was his home studio originally. This was right outside of Lake Wobegon, where the college was.
That's right.
So we would do the music and actually played, with him before he had a formal touring band, and got a lot of exposure to just about anything, including getting down to Minneapolis and working some of the studios down there. Was able to study, lessons with a guy named Eric Cravat, who was the Weather Report drummer back for a couple of albums, then went on to work with McCoy Tyner, and got exposed to, wow, there's a whole universe way beyond what I do. And really was fortunate in that somehow I always got the call. So I was able, either with a band or with a pickup band, to be the warm-up band for, when Johnny Cash came to town. So I got to meet those folks, and I got to meet Three Dog Night in Chicago, and be, at least meet these folks and see that level. But my main career was after I got out of school, I got a degree in accounting and economics. So I was working, since I was 14, as the repair guy at the local hobby shop, and managed to get a job and moved to Cleveland, Ohio, of all places, to run a part of a small regional toy store in a mall back when those things existed. But had the good fortune that right across from us in the mall was a record store, and that was back when you had regional record chains, and these were the big dogs in Cleveland. So any act that came into town, they had the concert tickets for, they had, the band would show up and do signings. So still kept to stay in touch. And that was when Ohio Players came through, and all these types of folks. So kept my chops heroes going through that. And again, just playing bar bands and pickup bands while I had a day job. Then moved out to Boston for a number of years, again, with a retail company. But was neat in Boston, again, because I had to live there about 6 months before my family at the time, we had to sell a house, buy a house. So I, was working with a gal who had a couple of guys living in a house. Well, one of the guys happened to be the local talent rep for Polydor Records. Or Polygram, or whatever it was called back then. So all of a sudden, we're doing things, and we're having jam sessions, and you're at a party, and the guys in Boston was a great music haven back then. So you got these incredible groups of people from Aerosmith on down that would show up at the drunken party, doing illicit drugs, whatever, in jam sessions. So it just kept me really rolling, with that level, all the way through till when I moved to Atlanta. And I joined a startup company called Home Depot. Oh, yeah. And that, for the next 22 years occupied me, and I really stopped playing completely because I was on the road traveling internationally with them. But was neat because when I went to India, I would always plan, a couple of days. So I studied tabla with one of Ravi Shankar's, tabla players, and went down to Australia, and I learned how to play didgeridoo, and so really got into world music, before world music was a thing.
So we have an auxiliary percussion closet that is astonishing.
That's incredible. We should do something with the didgeridoo. I love that sound.
When I was in college, I took a summer semester abroad and went to West Africa. And, it was a business program. You had to have a paper. And I studied indigenous African music and how you could possibly export that into the US market. Now, this was way before Paul Simon and all that stuff. But basically, for 3 months, I got into a band, and I joined a local band, and traveled around as the white drummer in the band. I was Quasi Bruno, but playing the style of the music is what was called high life, what you call music now. So managed to spend a couple of months just traveling around Africa, both playing in their dance bands, in the bars, but also during the daytime playing with, there's some incredible African, what we would call operas, or what we would call, ballets again, all done with ethnic music, obviously, and ethnic drumming. So that was an incredible, background, and that still hangs around today. When I joined Home Depot, the first trade show I went to, and I'd been with the company 2 weeks, and big trade shows back then were in Chicago, got into a cab with my 2 new bosses to get from the airport. And I heard the accent of the cab driver was familiar. I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Well, I grew up in Ghana," which is where I headquartered. Turns out he knew the band that I had played with. He knew the lead singer.
Oh my gosh,
well, yeah, Tommy, he's in New York now driving the cab.
Oh,
the whole story being music is such an international, phenomena. And you it's not what you do, it's the ability to reach out and touch other musicians, and through that, you know, you learn other musicians and other styles and other people. And it's just a beautiful thing. It's a very
small world when it comes to music.
People, if they don't know the other person, they know of them, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really a small community. But yeah, that stint in Africa must have been absolutely fascinating.
We traveled that whole underneath the hump. So we worked, Ghana was where we were headquartered. That's where we started at the University of Accra, which was in Ghana, which is a headquarter in Ghana. But we went through Logo. We were heading to Nigeria, and that was right when Idi Amin took over. So they closed the borders there, but was up in the Ivory Coast area. And there I wasn't with the band. We were traveling with the college kids. We were doing a road trip. But of course, we heard music and coming out of a place and wandered in, and there was a Middle Eastern wedding reception going on. And, you know, I crashed the party. We started to drink. Pretty soon I'm playing with the band, you know, at a Middle Eastern wedding in you know, Abidjan. Yeah, and wow, you know, how do you explain things like that, you know?
Oh, it's the universal language. It's fantastic.
Yep. So it's
well, let me ask you, how did you two meet and where?
Oh, well, he was with Home Depot for 22 years. I was with them for 25, and we actually met at Home Depot. I was working here in Atlanta. I was at one of the original three original stores, one on Memorial Drive, Jonesboro, and one other. So I was at Jonesboro Road, and I was running the plumbing department at the time. And at the time when they hired buyers for the home office, they actually made them work in the field for 6 months or something. So they learned what it was. So, you know, one day this guy shows up at my store who's like on the phone all the time, calling it, you know, doing everything but like helping pack out and doing the stuff that we had to do on the floor. I'm like, who is this guy? Turns out it was Randy. You know, so that's where we actually met. And fast forward another 10, 12 years, we wound up, both of us working out on the West Coast. He was in the buying office in California. I was doing some other stuff out of the office there. So we ran into each other out there. And then, you know, of course, we were both married at the time, had families. We wind up working here in Atlanta, back at the home office. And at that point, you know, we were both single. So we got together. So although we've only been married 10 years, we've probably known each other for 35 years, something like that.
That's really lovely.
Yeah. So at least it gives us some common background. We can talk a lot of the same language, you know, when it comes to just shortcuts of things.
And similar experiences, you know.
Yep. And again, you know, neat things. So when we got married, we decided, because, you know, we didn't need a big wedding, having both been there, done that. So we decided to just invite, you know, immediate family and a few good friends, and went down to a little city south of here called New Orleans, which is my own personal favorite place, you know, in the United States to go to. And, you know, so we rented a hall in Altmann, and so we had a string quartet playing at our wedding, and then we had, you know, jazz, and you know, it just, the whole music thing again was just, you know, what we did, and you know, who the people we invited, you know, enjoyed coming to, because that obviously is a common ground for both of us, and you know, most of our family begrudgingly, you know, acknowledges that.
Yeah. So even though they think some of it's a little weird, but that's,
well, some of it is. So what, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
So let me ask each of you what your favorite type of music is for you to play, basically.
Let me tell you, as horrific as this pandemic has been for all of us, it has been wonderful for me in a sense that, you know, when the world shut down, I mean, I was doing 5 rehearsals a week and, you know, trying to fit in concerts and things like that in the middle. So I was pretty busy up until everything shut down. I wasn't playing, so it allowed me to actually you know, reset what I did, because I'd always, when I turned 50, I said, you know what, I don't know anything about this genre called jazz, and I want to learn. Not that I particularly like jazz, but it's so different. The idea of improvisation is so different. I said, this is a prime time to set down my horn and really focus on playing trumpet and seeing what I could do with this. So I now, after you know, a year of working at it, I play in a pretty good jazz band. I play third trumpet, but I can hang with some of these guys that are pretty good players here in Atlanta. and it was just a different thing to learn. It's music. It's played similarly to classical in a way, but in a lot of ways, it's so different. The way they think, the way they process sound is so different from a classical player. I could always get a gig because I could read anything you put on the page in front of me. You know what? As a jazz player, they don't care.
Yes, right.
That's not a skill that they aspire to, and that's hard to wrap your head around.
I have to say, my respect for improv is very high. I find
oh my gosh,
amazing. And a lot of most classical players need the sheet music.
Yeah,
but
they don't. They don't even need the changes. I mean, I played with some of these guys, and we're doing some. I mean, it's not your basic. It's a jazz band that is formed and it exists for the benefit of the players. Mm-hmm. They could care less if anyone shows up to hear a concert. They're doing this for themselves. Right. So they're playing the kinds of music they want to play. And some of it is pretty out there. Mm-hmm. But you listen to these guys do the improv and they just, I know, I kind of know what key we're in and they just go. And it's different every time. And it's beautiful. And it really is when you hear somebody who's not just regurgitating everything they've ever heard, mm-hmm. and they're doing what feels right in the moment, that just takes it to a level that I can barely wrap my head around.
Right. Oh, I agree. That's fabulous. So you're going to keep up with that post?
Oh yeah. I never could have made the switch of playing. I can go back and I can play horn, and sometimes I do. I mean, we play a lot of Stan Kenton charts that require a horn in it, and so I love to do that because Stan Kenton is, whoever wrote that stuff actually wrote some pretty good stuff for a horn. Right. But I can go back, but I never could have figured out how to blow a trumpet without putting the horn down for a year. Mm-hmm. It is so different in how you blow. Yeah. So, but I'll definitely keep it up because I enjoy it. And it's something I can do with 12 or 15 people on a stage, and orchestral work just isn't, to have a horn, you're not going to do that in a chamber group for the most part.
Right.
And I just don't see a whole lot of that coming back anytime soon.
Interesting. Yeah. You have a different outlook for that.
Yeah. So it gave me a way to play all through this, and the hard part was I had to learn to play wearing a mask. Mm. And that's a challenge, but I figured out how to do it. And I think that the players who are going to play have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. Well, Randy, what about you? What's your favorite?
Split. When I was either 10 or 12 or something, I got my first stereo, which is one of these old, turntables that you folded down and had two speakers built in. And I was, a Christmas present. And for, it was for my parents, and my big brother, who at that time had gone to school out in New York and was living in Maryland, brought me the first albums I ever owned. And one was Because Sorcerer Apprentice, one was the 1812 Overture. And I mean, just to hear a music that told and painted a picture was just, and to this day is an emotional experience. The other two albums were Herbie Mann Live at the Village Gate and Dave Brubeck, Time Out. And that was just
a little eclectic there.
Like my brain exploded on the other side. So certainly, orchestrally, I love the orchestral tones. I love being able to play, timpani because there are notes in the way it plays off of the horns, and more importantly, I love when I'm not playing because I can just listen, to the way the music evolves, and it's emotionally a beautiful thing. But when we were freshmen in high school, the first band I put together, and it was my girlfriend, who was a bass player, and then two brothers, one played piano and one played saxophone. So the first thing we played was some Herbie Mann stuff and then some Brubeck stuff, and that was when we were freshmen. Right. By the time we were seniors, the girlfriend was gone, but we formed a jazz quartet that basically played all, and that you had nightclubs to play in and that sort of thing. And we got to a point where we were playing good enough that we had guys drop in. Bill Cosby stopped in one day. Not that that's a good name anymore. Bob Hope came by one day because they heard, and we're in the middle of nowhere. You know, we're not downtown Minneapolis, so they happened to be coming through to do a show somewhere in the jazz part of it. You know, both the and then playing big band jazz. You know, which now you're driving a battleship. You know, when you're the rhythm section, and again had the privilege when I was in college. You know, we had bands that came through, so I got to sit in with Maynard Ferguson's band. You know, because they would do a session in the morning with Don Ellis's band, and you know, oh my goodness, you know what that does. And then at the time the conductor we had for that was incredible. So we would take our big band and we'd go out and do high school clinics. You know, and now we're doing the same thing with the Nick, and that is a whole different brain set for me. You know, because it's improv. You know, in a small group. In a big band, it is just being that heartbeat. So I'm really split between the two because orchestrally, it's a much more emotional experience, you know, but the jazz part of it is a much more, you know, brain set. Unfortunately, you know, 20 years of not playing, you know, I just don't have the chops anymore to sit down and do jazz. I can fake, you know, orchestral sort of, you know, but to sit down and get, you know, be able to get 2 feet going and 2 hands going and do polyrhythms and it just, you know, I can hear it and I can feel it, but, you know, I'd be embarrassed to sit down and try to play with anybody. But it's still what I love to listen to.
Incredible experience, both of you. I mean, it's just, you know, and those sort of encounters with great musicians, they inspire, they stimulate, they you know, enliven us, you know, to keep on moving, to keep on pushing. It's invaluable. And you know, it's interesting. Most of the you know, professionals I've met with who've been kind enough to spend time, you know, have all been, you know, incredibly generous, you know, with their time.
Yeah, I really think that the better the musician is, the more humble, the more approachable they are. And I don't know how much has been done on the orchestral side. I know in the jazz world, in the horn and the trumpet world, there are guys that are sitting around that normally would be on the road playing 5, 6, 7 nights a week. Well, they're sitting at home in their studios, and what they've done is they're starting to do these chats. Like somebody will set up hey, every week I'm going to bring in a different musician and we're going to talk and ask them questions, and then they'll start bringing in their friends. And so you wind up at the trumpet world with some amazing players. My teacher hosts a weekly podcast, and he brings in, a couple of weeks ago, Wayne Bergeron. He's brought in Mort Gould. And so you're Zooming with these guys and you're actually having conversations. And I got into it with Mort over, you know, the future of orchestral music. And he's, you know, coming from New York Phil and having this, obviously it's a very small mindset of here's where we are. I'm like, dude, you need to understand it's going to be amateur musicians like me, like a lot of the groups I play with. We're the ones that are going to hold on to this music because we're the ones that can afford to do it. And we're the ones that you don't need to have 100 people in the audience to pay to have you on stage. And to be able to have conversations like that with absolute legends has been, you know, such a blessing this last year. You get to know these guys and they're willing to share their experiences with, you know, all the people out there that may not have heard, you know, who they are, what they do, what they did.
How they think. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's really exciting.
I mean, to your point about what the good ones, you know, are remarkably approachable and love to talk, not about how much they know, but like to share. Again, back in my childhood days, went up for a couple of years to what was the Newport Jazz Festival. They were holding it up in Saratoga. So, you know, and, you know, we bought 2 seats in close to the bandstand, and then, you know, a van load of us was sitting on the grass seats. So we rotated around, and I'm sitting there and we're watching, I think Grover Washington, you know, Jr., may rest in peace. And he was doing a set, and 2 guys come in and sit in front of me. and I stare and they look familiar. Well, one of them's Lenny Bernstein, and he's sitting next to Dave Brubeck, and they're watching this guy and commenting. And I'm one row behind him, listening to them, and you know, I kind of get the nerve up to and ask a question, and they say, "Well, this is really neat, and here's where we're going." And you know, you're just sitting there talking, you know, sure. And you know, wow, you know, and these are guys that, you know, I listen to their recordings, you know, and,
yeah, gosh,
you know, but they're sitting there just like any other Joe, drinking beer and you know, listening to the music, and very happy to talk about what they're hearing and what they're doing. And, you know, that's what makes this a really neat industry, a really neat business, really neat camaraderie, again, because of that ability to say, yeah, been there, done that. And I've talked to people and learned from them, or just listening to them, you kind of rubs off on you.
Well, exactly. And they're enthusiastic, obviously, about their work and their passion. They, you know, unless they're in a bad mood, they, like any of us, you know,
yeah.
they like to share it. And yeah, it's a real gift, you know, to be around these people. That's great. Are you going to continue the Zoom chats?
Oh, absolutely. As long as those guys are out there and they're not working yet.
Good. I
mean, no one is going on tour at this point. So, which is a shame. I don't think the New York Phil is back yet. I think those guys are still sitting around doing nothing.
Well, let me ask each of you some sort of different questions. Sara, what's your favorite word or quote?
My favorite word or quote. It's got to be something by Churchill. Mm. I can't. So there's so many out there, but you know, that's he used words and phrases better than just about anyone.
Absolutely.
And sometimes in a good way, sometimes not in a good way.
Oh, yeah,
and he was the master of the put down. But I think most any speech he made is inspiring. Yeah. Just his ability to turn a phrase.
And Randy, what's your favorite and least favorite sound?
Least favorite sound is absolutely fingernail type sound on a chalkboard, which of course nobody knows today because there are no chalkboards, but I still remember that. And probably my most favorite sound is either a marimba or a vibe, you know, in terms of I think that's some of the purest notes in music, you know, that I've ever heard. Because they're always in tune. I'm not sure why.
Stop it.
But I love the sound of either one of those instruments.
They're pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. Sara, what profession other than the one you've taken would you have liked to have attempted, or may still attempt at some point?
To be a historian, to be an archivist.
Interesting.
I love history. And had I known at the time that you could do something besides teach, I would have been a history major.
Yeah.
But, you know, I knew I didn't want to teach. Like, well, that's all you can do. Okay, fine, I'll do something else. But no, I love history. And I would love to be a historian of some sort. I've done a lot of, reading on the Second World War, Battle of Britain. Yeah, what they did was pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Randy, what profession would you not like to do?
Traveling salesman or any kind of a salesman. And we all, to a degree, sell ourselves because whatever we do, that's a part of it. But, you know, we're every day I had to get up and close a sale. And I just find that the only thing less disingenuous would be, you know, an insurance salesman, still a salesman, a car salesman, and worst of all would be a politician. But to a degree, we're all of that, but to do that professionally, no, thank you.
Yeah, I must say I agree with you. What are you two reading now?
What am I reading? I'm reading a new book on. It just was published on the history of the Anglo-Saxons.
Mm-hmm. What period? Yeah. Just come.
It covers from basically after the Romans pulled out of England about 409 or something like that. So I think it's going to cover that until pretty much the Vikings got there. But it just came out last week, so I'm just starting it.
That's fabulous. You know, have you been over to England to see the Roman?
I've been to England and I haven't seen the Romans. I went when we went over there about 10 years ago, I took Randy to see, the name of the town's called Battle. It's outside of Rye. It was where the Battle of Hastings took place.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually saw the battlefield where that took place.
Incredible.
And in a little place, what was that name called? Stonehenge?
Oh, yeah, we went to Stonehenge. So we pretty much hit everything. So we went to Stonehenge. I took him to Chawton because I'm a big Jane Eyre fan. So we went, or Jane Austen fan. So we went there and wound up at the Tattoo up in Edinburgh.
Nice. Nice.
When I figure out how to play horn and I learn how to play trumpet, the next instrument I'm going to learn is the bagpipes.
Yeah.
God help us.
Scotland's marvelous. I love Scotland. And
you know, today is the, what did I say, 275th anniversary of Culloden.
Yep.
Really?
I think that's today. Yeah.
And what about you, Randy? Are you tackling any new music or books?
I've actually gotten very retro, so I've started to reread some of my favorites. I just finished most of the Ayn Rand stuff because I was feeling depressed with the world and the way things are going. So
that helped.
Yeah,
wonderful. And right now I'm just about halfway through the complete Sherlock Holmes stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm finding I enjoy reading things I've already read just because of all the things I forgot or didn't realize.
Sure.
I'm chasing down, well, that was a great Schwarzenegger movie. Let me go reread the book and see how it was supposed to be.
Nice.
So, it's so really going back to, I wouldn't call them old classics, but it's, the old things that I enjoyed reading. I'm not sure after I get through, there's a few more Sherlock Holmes stories in that volume, but not sure what I'll tackle next.
Yeah, no, they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. Well, let me ask each of you, my last question that I don't know if you've seen any of the other interviews, but if heaven exists, Sara, what would you like to have St. Peter say as you approach the pearly gates at some point?
Come on in.
That's short and sweet. I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Randy?
I unfortunately have the same ambition, but I suspect he will say, thanks for trying. We really appreciate all your effort. And what happens after that, not so sure.
You're afraid he'll say, let's try again?
So many possible options, and there are more bad outcomes than good. What can I say?
No, I'm so grateful to both of you for all your work with the AMO, and I really hope we can get going again this summer and in some way or shape and build it up. And we've still got the gala coming up at some point in the next two.
It will be very festive because it's always better when you have to wait longer.
That's right, exactly.
And I have a theory. I really think it may not happen immediately, but within the next 5 years, there are so many quasi-professional musicians, for lack of a better word for them, people who get paid to go do these pickup gigs. Well, those things aren't going to happen because they can't pay players, what they were making because they simply can't put enough audience members in seats. And that's not going to change right now. So I really think you're going to see a lot of these pretty good musicians who didn't have the time or the inclination to play in the free community groups. I think you'll see a lot of them migrate into the community groups.
That'd be fabulous, yeah.
And I really, really believe that it's going to be the amateurs, the adult enthusiasts, whatever you want to call us, that are going to keep music alive and keep it going into the next generation. Because the professionals, a lot of them are going, you know what, I don't need to be doing this. And they're going to do, I know so many people who've gone into just different industries. Like I'm not going to play anymore. But they will come back to play one night a week or 2 nights a week or play. And I think that's really going to help a lot of the community groups.
I think
we're going to get an infusion.
That's a really interesting take. That's a good optimistic take too, to grow that groundswell up with the serious amateurs or the professionals who just, there's not the full orchestras yet, and there's not the big paying audience to carry them. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you both. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you. Good chatting with you.
And thank you for keeping the communication going, you know, within the group and the community. That is going to pay dividends whenever, wherever we can get back together. And, you know, that's important. It really is. So thank you for your efforts.
Of course. It's good. It's, I've gotten some lovely feedback, you know, sometimes more, sometimes less. But it's been really, it's been very satisfying. And
good.
You know, I feel like keeping my, you know, chickens together, you know.
Well, we can't hug, but we can give elbows to each other.
Exactly. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.